Each month, about 71 million Americans, retirees, disabled workers, and others, receive checks from Social Security. But each year, about 1 million people get something else in the mail, a bill. They're told they owe the government money, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, because the Social Security Administration miscalculated their benefits and paid them too much. It can happen to anyone, and it can take years, even decades, for these unexpected debts to suddenly come to light. It often doesn't matter if it's not the recipient's fault, they still have to pay. Few people realize it, but Social Security's mistakes are your responsibility.
The story will continue in a moment.
Last year, at Stephen and Becky Sword's home in Chicago, a letter arrived from the Social Security Administration. When Becky Sword read it, she was stunned to discover that she and her husband owed Social Security $51,887 and were expected to repay it within 30 days.
That letter changed your life?
Oh, yeah.
Are you scared?
He's thinking we're going to lose our house. What are we going to do? I mean, we're very scared.
When we spoke with Stephen and Becky Sword in August, Stephen was making $16 an hour as a security guard on the overnight shift at a condominium complex. Becky was working days as an occupational therapy assistant in a nursing home. They're 62 years old and have worked full-time most of their lives. But for several years now, Stephen's been dealing with the effects of a pancreatic disease that nearly killed him in 2016.
How long were you in the hospital for?
About 105 days. It was hard because when I left the hospital, it took me about 2 months to learn to eat and walk again.
Stephen started receiving Social Security disability checks in 2017 as he recovered and returned to work. The agency's rules are complicated, but Becky faxed Stephen's pay stubs to Social Security so the agency could monitor his earnings and eligibility. She kept the fax receipts.
So I knew they were getting it,
Right.
In return, Social Security sent the Swords letters like this one, saying it had increased Stephen's benefits to give him credit for his 2019 earnings.
Is the impression you got from that they're examining the pay stubs
definitely.
and they're paying attention and adjusting
because they're
accordingly?
increasing it. Yeah.
But the letter the Swords got last year from Social Security said Stephen shouldn't have gotten any money at the time the agency gave him that increase. Stephen and Becky owed more than $50,000, the agency said, because we did not stop his checks about 3 years sooner.
Has anyone at Social Security ever sort of apologized?
No, they take no
They
blame
say
at
it's
all.
our fault.
They're saying you should have known that
They're making too much money.
that Social Security was giving you too much money.
Yeah.
Even though Social Security didn't know that they were giving you too much
yeah,
money.
which is strange because you're sending in all your pay stubs. Someone has to file that.
And when we asked them, they said, well, they're not looking at that every month. And then she even said, well, they're not even looking at it every year. I would think yearly at least they would review it. I could see making a mistake after a few months, but not 3 years of a mistake.
No.
And then they blamed it on COVID. They blamed it on being understaffed. And so to me, right there, it's saying it's their fault.
The Social Security Administration told us its privacy rules prevent it from commenting on individual cases like the Swords, and no one from the agency would give us an on-camera interview. But Kilolo Kijakazi, the acting commissioner of Social Security, gave this testimony before a congressional committee late last month.
How many people are receiving overpayment notices in a year?
For FY 2022, 1,028,389. For FY 2023, 986,912.
Seems like an awful lot.
Nobody knows this is happening to so many people.
This is not a story Social Security wants to publicize.
No.
Terry Savage writes a nationally syndicated column on personal finance. Lawrence Kotlikoff, an economics professor at Boston University, created software to help people maximize their Social Security benefits. Together, they've been trying to draw attention to what they call Social Security horror stories, caused largely, they say, by the Social Security Administration's own mistakes.
Their mantra, their rule is, our mistake is your mistake. And you can appeal it or ask for a waiver. The only reason they will waive this clawback is if you are indigent, really, really poor.
The worst part of it is they have all the power because they say if you don't pay us back, we're just going to cut your benefit check. Imagine, people live on those checks, and all of a sudden you get no check or a small amount.
If someone's been paid too much in Social Security benefits, why shouldn't they have to pay it back?
Because you relied on it, so you may have decided to retire early or to spend the money on your child's tuition.
Overpayments have existed for decades and caused people a lot of financial pain. But fixing the problem has never been a high priority on Capitol Hill. In 2015, Congress did approve a measure to reduce overpayments by giving Social Security more timely access to payroll data. But 8 years later, the agency still hasn't put the new system in place. Aging technology and staff shortages have taken a toll on Social Security. Last year, the agency's workforce hit a 25-year low as the number of people claiming benefits kept going up. When we took a close look at Social Security's annual reports to Congress, we discovered something else has been going up as well: the amount of money the agency has been clawing back from the checks of people with overpayments. Jean Rodriguez, who's 73 years old, told us her retirement checks had been withheld for the past 2 years. A former school cafeteria worker, she started receiving benefits in 2014. But 4 years later, she and her husband Glenn were asked to come to the local Social Security office in Virginia Beach, Virginia, to speak with the representative.
And he says, we have a small problem.
How much did he say they had overpaid you?
$72,000.
That doesn't sound like a small problem.
No, it wasn't. We were both devastated.
What did they tell you happened?
Somewhere along the line, they made a combination of 4 other people in addition to my numbers.
So they were giving you benefits based not just on your salary, but on 4 other people's salary all combined.
Right.
How does that happen?
Good question. Don't know how they did it.
Did Social Security admit to you that this was their fault?
Yes, they did.
But the agency said the Rodriguezes had to pay the money back anyway because they could afford to do so. Jean and Glenn own their home, and Glenn gets a pension from the Navy.
If it was something I knew I did totally wrong, they have the right to come after me, but I didn't know how they calculated it, and then they waited 4 years to figure it out.
In a statement, the Social Security Administration told us our payment accuracy rates are high, yet even small error rates add up to substantial improper payment amounts. The agency said it's required by law to recover this money and added that overpayments are not necessarily the agency's fault. They can happen when a beneficiary does not timely report work or other financial information. There's no statute of limitations on how long Social Security can wait to collect an overpayment. 2 years ago, Roy Farmer of Grand Rapids, Michigan, got a letter from Social Security asking him whether he'd forgotten to pay a debt he didn't know he had.
This is an alleged overpayment from 20 years ago.
Yes, sir.
When you were 11 or 12 years old.
Correct.
Roy Farmer grew up in rural Cadillac, Michigan, in a family of 6 that struggled to make ends meet.
We ended up near homelessness a couple of times. At one point, even living, 6 of us in a camper trailer.
He was born with cerebral palsy.
I had leg braces. I had to walk with a child-sized version of like an old person walker.
And you had surgeries, you had doctor's visits,
Absolutely.
You had it treated.
Yeah, and so thankfully they were able to get me to a point where I can live a more or less normal life with some limitations.
He's 33 years old now and works full-time. But when he was a child, his mother received benefits on his behalf. Social Security told him that when he was 11 years old, the agency determined he was no longer medically eligible for benefits, and his mother received $4,902 too much. His mother died a few years ago, and the agency is insisting he pay back the money because it believes he can afford to do so.
Could you afford $4,902?
No, sir. That much is about 1/6 of my annual take-home pay.
Like most of the people we spoke to, Roy Farmer couldn't find a lawyer to help him. There's little financial incentive for attorneys to take on these cases. It took Farmer 9 months to get the documents in his Social Security file. He was looking for the agency's evidence that he was no longer medically eligible for benefits when he was 11 years old. But, he says, there was none.
And they told me, We probably had it at some point, but we don't have it now.
And they admit there's no evidence you're at fault, but they're still coming after you for it.
Yes, sir.
People at Social Security have told us, look, this is a law, this has to be changed through Congress, our hands are tied.
It's not, Anderson, because the law says that if equity and good conscience demands that the clawback be waived, it should be waived.
Lawrence Kotlikoff, the economist who's written about overpayments, is talking about a specific part of the Social Security Act that says the agency should not recover an overpayment if doing so would be against equity and good conscience. The problem, he says, is that Social Security interprets that phrase in a very narrow way.
So the agency itself, Social Security Administration, has a lot of discretion.
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, sure they do.
But they're financially, the long-term picture is not good, and they've trained the staff, look, your job is to collect every penny you can, no matter what.
The Social Security Trust Fund for Retirement and Disability Benefits is expected to be depleted around 2035 because the benefits being paid out are greater than the payroll taxes coming in. But Kotlikoff and Savage argue that clawing back money from the elderly and disabled isn't going to make much of a dent in that problem. They say there are some simple things Congress and the Social Security Administration could do to alleviate the stress and financial difficulty caused by overpayments. For example,
shouldn't there be a statute of limitations so that after 18 months, it's their mistake and they have to deal with it, not the person who mistakenly received and lived on that benefit check?
If it's more than a year or two.
Just waive it. Just say, our mistake, you're fine.
Roy Farmer in Michigan has been waiting 4 months to appeal his case before an administrative law judge who works for Social Security. Gene and Glenn Rodriguez told us they'd been waiting 4 years. As for the Swords in Chicago, Stephen and Becky told us they were tired of fighting the government and had decided not to appeal the matter any further.
I just figured we're going to have to give up our retirement funds.
That's the only way you can.
That's the only way, yeah. Because they said we'd have to pay it back in 3 years' time, and we'd have to come up with $1,400 a month to pay back, and we don't have that. We don't have that, kind of money.
When Stephen Sword was not working the night shift and Becky Sword was not working the day shift, they were preparing to hand over most of the $60,000 they'd saved for their retirement to the government agency charged with supporting Americans in their old age. All the people we interviewed for this story asked the Social Security Administration to waive their debts. Their requests were denied. But after we asked the agency about these cases, Social Security told the Swords, the Rodriguezes, and Roy Farmer that they would not have to pay the money back. The agency says it's now reviewing its policies and procedures regarding overpayments.
How to make sure you are not overpaid by Social Security at 60minutesovertime.com.